The revelation of their betrayal left Ada and Obinna shattered. Heartbroken and enraged, Obinna couldn't bear to see Ada's broken spirit. He vowed to do everything possible to find their child and bring justice to those who had wronged them. Ada, though still weak from childbirth, clung to this promise, drawing strength from Obinna's resolve. Their first move was to confront Chika and Nnamdi, demanding any information they had on Mrs. Bello. Chika, still defensive, feigned ignorance, but Nnamdi, overwhelmed by guilt, finally broke. He revealed that Mrs. Bello had connections with a shadowy network known for trafficking newborns to wealthy families across Nigeria. The network operated under a strict veil of secrecy, making it nearly impossible for outsiders to track. Desperate and with no other leads, Obinna decided to take matters into his own hands. He and Ada sought the help of a trusted friend, Emeka, a former police officer with experience in tracking underground operations. Emeka warned them of the dangers but agreed to help, driven by the injustice of their situation. Together, they started to piece together a trail of Mrs. Bello's past dealings. Emeka's contacts in the police force led them to old, hidden records of similar cases where newborns had been sold, families left in ruins. The grim reality of their situation sank in, but the flicker of hope that they might find their child kept them moving forward. The investigation took them across Abuja, from shadowy government offices to obscure neighborhoods known for illegal dealings. Ada and Obinna found themselves in parts of the city they had never ventured into, where people were hesitant to speak but hinted at Mrs. Bello's reputation. Days turned into weeks, and each new lead felt like a dead end, but they refused to give up. Through Emeka's relentless digging, they discovered a shocking piece of information. Mrs. Bello had connections to a powerful businessman named Alhaji Musa, who was known for his shady dealings in the adoption market. Alhaji Musa was a highly influential figure in Abuja, and rumors swore that he often made donations to keep officials quiet about his operations. Realizing they needed leverage, Obinna decided to confront Alhaji Musa directly. Emeka warned him that dealing with someone as ruthless as Musa would require caution and a solid plan. But Obinna's desperation overpowered his caution, and he insisted that the confrontation was necessary if they were to uncover the truth about their child. Under Emeka's guidance, Obinna managed to arrange a meeting with Alhaji Musa at a luxury hotel under the pretense of wanting to adopt a child. The meeting was tense from the start. Alhaji Musa's imposing figure and piercing gaze made it clear that he was no ordinary businessman. He laughed off Obinna's inquiries, mocking his desperation and reminding him that people in his position held power over those who had none. In a moment of daring courage, Obinna revealed his true intentions, boldly accusing Alhaji Musa of trafficking their child. Musa's demeanor shifted instantly. He grew cold, his eyes narrowing with silent menace. He warned Obinna to stay out of affairs beyond his control and hinted that meddling in his business would come with consequences. But Obinna pressed on, demanding the location of their child. The room fell silent as Musa weighed his options, finally agreeing to provide information for a steep price, 5 million naira. It was an outrageous demand, but with no other choice, Obinna agreed, knowing it would take everything he had to raise the funds. Determined, Obinna and Ada sold everything they owned, borrowed from friends, and even asked strangers for help, fueled by their desire to see their child again. After weeks of grueling efforts, they managed to gather the amount, risking everything to meet Musa's price. When they returned to Musa, he smirked as they handed him the cash, clearly reveling in his power. He scribbled down an address on a piece of paper and tossed it at them dismissively. "You'll find what you're looking for there," he sneered before leaving them in the empty room, his laughter echoing in their ears. Obinna and Ada arrived at the address in the dead of night. It was a rundown, isolated house on the outskirts of Abuja. As they approached, they were filled with a mixture of hope and dread. Emeka had arranged backup in case things went wrong, but the weight of the moment made their hearts pound. Inside, they found a dimly lit room, where Mrs. Bello sat surrounded by medical equipment and documents, proof of her involvement in the illegal trafficking ring. She seemed startled to see them but quickly recovered, her expression icy and unrepentant. "What makes you think you can come here and take back what you sold?" Mrs. Bello sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "You had nothing to offer that child. I gave her a better life." Ada, trembling with rage, stepped forward. "You stole my child. You took advantage of my family's trust, of our vulnerability, just to make money." Mrs. Bello's smirk never wavered. "You can shout all you want, but this is business, dear. Sentiment doesn't change anything." Just as Obinna was about to retaliate, Emeka's backup team stormed in, arresting Mrs. Bello and her associates. But Ada's relief was short-lived, their child was still missing. Under pressure from Emeka and the authorities, Mrs. Bello finally revealed that the baby had been sold to a wealthy couple living in an affluent neighborhood of Abuja. With a newfound resolve, Obinna and Ada approached the home of the couple who had taken in their baby. The house was a mansion, grand and cold, far removed from the warmth they had imagined raising their child in. They knocked on the heavy, ornate door, and a maid opened it, eyeing them warily. After tense discussions and nearly being turned away, they were finally able to speak to Mr. and Mrs. Adewale, the couple who had adopted their child. Mr. Adewale, a stoic businessman, insisted he had no idea the child was taken illegally, claiming he believed the adoption had been lawful. But Ada, her heart torn between anger and desperation, looked into the eyes of Mrs. Adewale and could see the truth. Mrs. Adewale, who held the baby in her arms, refused to make eye contact with Ada. The mother in Ada recognized a flicker of guilt in her gaze. "We are her real parents," Ada whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, she belongs with us." Mrs. Adewale looked down at the child, then at Ada, struggling with an internal conflict. Slowly, reluctantly, she handed the child back to Ada, her face twisted in sorrow and understanding. Obinna wrapped his arms around Ada as they finally held their child, both crying with relief and happiness. As they turned to leave, Mr. Adewale threatened legal action, declaring they had no right to take the baby. But Emeka, who had followed them, stepped forward with legal documents proving the illegality of the transaction, ensuring that Mr. Adewale's threats held no weight. With no choice, the Adewales watched in silence as Obinna, Ada, and their child walked out of their lives. The journey back to their modest apartment felt surreal. Ada held their baby tightly, vowing to never let her go again. The hardships they had endured left scars, but they also brought them closer together. The couple had lost everything they owned, but the love they shared and the family they had regained meant more than any wealth. They built a new life, fueled by their harrowing experience. Obinna started working with Emeka, helping to expose and bring down trafficking rings, hoping to protect other families from the pain they had endured. Ada found solace in her child's smile, the child who was now safe in her arms, loved and cherished as she deserved to be. And though they lived with little, Ada and Obinna's hearts were full, their love and strength an unbreakable shield around the family they had fought so fiercely to reclaim. The journey had been long and painful, but their child was home and, at last, so were they.